Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Retuning Your Firm. Today is episode 75. Wow. And it's Friday, the 17th of June, 2022. We've got a great panel today, as always, I'm sure. But anyway, and these are some of the themes that we're looking at. Confidence. Confidence is so important. And we've seen from a number of surveys recently coming from the IOD, CBI, and others that confidence has really fallen away dramatically over the past 6 months or so in the UK. And to what extent that impacts firms, I'm not sure. But I think what you can also say is there's a trade-off between confidence and uncertainty. And yeah, the confidence may be lower, but I think the certainty is higher. And that's when you can get into thinking about possibly strategy and planning. Whereas if it's totally uncertain, that's probably a complete waste of time. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about new work. We're talking about how you win the work and then how you deliver it through the people, around the people management issues. And we're having a trip into psychology and selling. And we're also going to be looking at some of the strategic options. So I think it's going to be a really interesting and exciting day. So fantastic. So let's just move on. So welcome, I'm Richard Chaplin, and I'm delighted to have you for today's show. So let me just talk you through who are the people that we're going to be actually talking to today on the show. Well, first of all, I would like to introduce, and bear a minute while I spotlight him, Derek Klyhn. Derek is a partner of PSFI, which I believe stands for Professional Services Firms International. And he is talking about strategic options. And now that there is a little bit more certainty in life, I think strategic options become that much more important. So I said a minute ago, if it's a total uncertainty, then probably all plans are a waste of time. But people may not agree with me on that. But either way, welcome, Derek. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts a little bit later. Our next participant, panelist, is Bernard Savage. And Bernard is a director, as you can see behind him, of size 10.5 boots. And he has been working within the marketing and business development world for more years than he and I care to admit, I suspect. And he's talking to us today about how do you win new work, particularly in this new environment where some firms get the tech, but some seem to be curiously unable to do so. And how does that help you when you're actually trying to win work from a client that is equally technophobe? Is interesting, I'm sure. So anyway, Bernard, welcome. Look forward to your thoughts. Our third panelist today is Andrew Mayo. Now, Andrew is the director of Mayo Learning International. And it's interesting because last time he was on the show, he was in Australia. And he was actually in Australia for a whole year and only managed to get out because his university said they definitely needed him to come back for some live teaching. Otherwise, he'd been there for another 4 months, I think. But anyway, welcome, Andrew. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you are talking about. And his theme, as I mentioned, is on managing human capital. In other words, you've won the work. How are you going to deliver it? And what does that mean in terms of the people agenda? Our final panelist is Kim Tasso. Kim is the founder and principal consultant of a business called RedStarKim. That's all one word. And she's talking about a topic that I think is so fundamental to a lot of marketing and selling and indeed human interaction, which is psychology, and with a particular focus on selling, because a lot of, I think, where firms are going to be needing to focus a lot more, particularly if clients' confidence is falling away, selling becomes a little bit harder and therefore actually that much more important. So welcome, Kim. So that's us sorted. So I will now come back to moi. Perfect, great. So what are we going to be doing today? Before I go into the poll section, I'll just talk you through a little bit of the forum news. As you probably gathered, we don't just have today's studio audience, welcome one and all of you, but we also have literally hundreds of people who are watching the videos from past shows. And I think it's north of 250 now. So if you're not taking advantage of them, please do, because they're there and they're a great resource. Talked to you in the past. I know we haven't met for a month because with the platinum, but certainly a month ago, I mentioned about Mentor Match. Pretty much all the mentees that have signed up are now in mentorships. And the great thing about that particular program is it's not only about matching mentors and mentees based on an algorithm, but it also giving them a secure, confidential place to engage in and really track all aspects of the mentoring relationship. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop, if you like. getting some great feedback. Somebody said to me, "Oh, can I have more than one mentor?" I said, "Well, one person's got 5 of them. I think that's probably a bit excessive, but if they can handle it, good for them." We had the awards on Wednesday. And I think what was really nice, I was the MC, was kind of seeing the happy faces of the winners, but at the same time, and Kim may have views on this, combined with the sort of nervousness, they were about to be grilled by me on their willing entry with absolutely no notice of the questions. So if they were a senior person who hadn't read the entry put together by their marketing team, and there weren't any of those, luckily, God help them. But anyway, the videos will be available shortly, working on them at the moment. And just staying with this show for a minute, we've got 2 more episodes before the summer break. That's on the 1st of July and the 15th of July. And certainly from my point of view, it'll be great because for both those episodes and thereafter, we've got Francesca Lagerberg, who has now in her new role, which I think I've mentioned, is the global CEO of Baker Tilly International. And she was told that as part of her 6-month garden leave, she couldn't join this show. So I suppose we take that as a compliment, but there you go. That's another story. So what we're going to do now, well, if you recall, we have a poll section, and wanted to just basically remind us why we do it. It's not just because we want to know what our peers are up to. It actually is important to UK government, and because they find it really hard to find out what the middle market think, basically. It won't surprise you, I suspect. But anyway, so they were very nice and kind and gave me that little quote, which of course I was happy to use and reuse and give it a little diamond and all the rest. So let's look at the last poll, and I appreciate this is a month ago, so some of you may not remember exactly what it was all about, but we had Jeremy Horner who talked about underperformance. So I thought it would be interesting to run the poll 2 months ago. And then I compared it with the same poll that we actually ran in March 2021. So what did we find out? Well, we found out that annual reviews are most common, but something like 20% of partners in the sample are never appraised. Now, I'm sure Andrew will have views on that, but I don't think you can say somehow not appraising somebody is a very smart way to manage them. Honesty, anonymous, these are all anonymous. People who completed it actually felt on the whole their firms had slightly more underperformers than was the case for their peer group. They obviously believe the anonymity. I don't think most people would admit that in public. What was it all about? Well, the key issue was about candor and openness. And the reason that people were sort of, excuse me, being allowed almost to continue to underperform is because they weren't being confronted in a suitable way. What were people doing about it? Well, knee jerk, I suppose. Let's slim down the partnership. Let's get rid of some of the people. And also a comment that people were finding it rather difficult to change gear at the same speed as the firm. That was the wording that came up. I think, again, that's quite an interesting one because, again, very strong people management issues there. Do you treat all people the same way? I hope not. Personal data counts more than team data in assessing performance. We all talk about teams, but when it comes to the nitty gritty, it's all about personal numbers, it would appear. Well, not all about, but it's pretty important. What about why are people kind of struggling? Well, the most common causes were fear of failure, as we all know. For a lawyer hates selling because it's an environment in which you have probably a 50% guaranteed failure rate because the best salesperson in the world probably hits 1 in 2 of their leads. And personal problems. Obviously, we didn't go into what they are, but clearly that is something which mattered. What about the remedies? Well, again, this won't probably be too surprising. Let's train them. Again, if it's a management issue, training is probably a complete waste of time because it's probably more about capabilities than competencies, and management is usually responsible for capabilities. Voluntary departures, and then reinvigorating moderate performance. Quite what reinvigorating means, nobody quite went into, but I think we all kind of know what that means. Hopefully not putting them in a barrel and shaking. So 2 or 3 slides, and I appreciate that the sort of view may not be completely clear for you, but to say that annual reviews are most common, but some partners are never reviewed. That's the blue on the left. That was the one in May, and that was 25%, which is a bit scary. That firms are reporting relatively high levels of underperformers, and again, the sort of numbers were in the 10 to 15%, it was running around about 10%. In the 6 to 10% range, it was around about half, and in the 1 to 5%, a third, and none was about less than 10%. So, definitely we've got those. And again, this one I'm sure you won't be able to see because it's quite untidy. At our firms, underperformers are not confronted with spirit, openness and candor in blue, all the way up there. At our firms, partners are over promoted. At our firms, poor performers is tolerated over a long period. You get the message. There's just a lot of stuff going on there, which isn't very wonderful. So let's move on. What do we want to talk about today? Well, today's poll, and it's anonymous, hasten to add, we're looking at marketing and new workflow. And we haven't looked at that for about 18 months. So the last time I asked these questions, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. And I was saying, once we come out of it, what do you think is going to be the case in terms of marketing? So today, hopefully, you'll be able to give me an answer to some of those questions. So what are we asking you to be looking at today? Well, first of all, we want to cover the activities where marketing and BR experts play a major role. And that's an interesting area because we usually find a little bit of a disconnect between what they are actually doing and what they should be doing. I'll use the word should with great care because I hate it, but I think it's probably appropriate. Current marketing team headcount and current levels of expenditure on marketing BD compared with the pre-pandemic, have people made up? And what are they looking to do next year? What's the expected year-on-year change? And then moving on to the new workflow, how much of the new workflow comes from new clients as opposed to existing clients? And if you're not tracking that, you've got a real problem. And what is the impact of hybrid working on your ability to win work from 4 different groups, both new UK and existing UK, and then new non-UK and existing non-UK? Okay, so let's look at the first question. The first question, if you recall, was about what are the activities where marketing and BR experts play a major role? And this one was about where they are currently playing a major role. And again, the marketing people amongst you possibly won't be surprised to see that the ones that come out, pitch support, 80%, CRM systems, coaching frontline advisors, 60%. The ones that aren't really making it, change agent, 10%, direct approaches to targets, 20%, developing new services, 10%, sourcing new clients and pricing strategies, 30%. So again, bear those in mind, because when it then comes to what should they be doing, pitch support, still there, 90% now, but actually some of those other ones, the pricing agent has gone up from, the change agent has gone up from 10% to 40%, and you can flick through them and seeing them yourselves. But generally, the message that's coming through is that in all those areas, where marketing are currently playing a major role, and where the people who responded today believe they should be playing a major role, are a little bit different. And that's interesting and hopefully gives the marketing team something to go for. What about headcount? Headcount compared with pre-pandemic, the general view is 40% says about the same, but 40% say it's up. So the blues that hit quite hard at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody thought their revenue was going to drop 30%, was, what did that say? Well, actually, they left a lot of marketing people go. And now it's, as somebody said the other day to me, it's the hottest marketing market, hottest recruitment market that they've known for a very, very long time. So generally, and 20% saying increased by more than 20%. In terms of budgets, though, budgets, again, not dissimilar, 80% saying they're increased. And that's compared with the pre-pandemic. So this is not an area which is ignored. I mean, 10% said they've reduced, 10% about the same, 80% increase. That's a pretty strong message. In terms of what's likely to happen from year on year into next year, again, nobody's reducing, 40% about the same, and 60% looking for an increase. So this is not an area that's being ignored by management. That's good news. So let's move on to new workflow now. And again, Bernard will probably be interested in these ones. This is, if you recall, the proportion of the new workflow. Typically, it comes from new clients. And the one that comes through strongest just is 10 to 15%, about 40%, but over 30% if you're over 20%, 20% in between, 10%, 5 to 10. So generally, I was looking at that and I would say the averaging is going to be around about 15 to 20% of the new work coming in from new clients, which is what they typically are seeing. And then we look at what's the impact of people working from home on a long-term basis, which is essentially where we're at now. Is it adversely impacting your firm's ability to win work? 10% no impact, 50% minimal, 30% modest, 10% significant, extreme nobody. That's, if you recall, from existing UK clients. When it comes to new UK clients, Modest has grown a bit. It was 30%. It's now grown to 60%. No impact is about the same, minimal impact. So there's a big shift from minimal to modest. I know there's only adjectives, but hopefully they give us some steer. And significant has again gone up a bit. In terms of the non-UK, again, the biggest one there now is modest again, and that's existing non-UK clients. And if we're looking at non-UK, new non-UK clients, a bit of a tongue twister there, again, no impact, 30%. So we can look at those and compare them, but I will stop sharing now because I think that's probably given us a flavor for what today's audience are seeing happening within their firms. And thank you all very much for completing that poll. It was much appreciated. So now it's my great pleasure to invite Derek Klyhn. And if you recall, Derek is partner in PSFI, and he's coming to talk to us about some of the strategic options. Over to you, Derek.
Thank you very much, Richard. Yeah, so the question today is about exploring strategic options, and to think about what strategic options professional firms have. What I've done is to answer that question in a way is to look at my animated analysis of how the UK, US and global legal market has developed over the last 20 years. And I'm also drawing upon my knowledge of how the accountancy marketplace has developed over more than 20 years. And when you look at this analysis, one thing is absolutely clear, and we all know this: firms have performed differently over this time. And the question is, why have they performed differently? What does it actually, so what accounts for the differences in performances? The answer lies in the strategic choices, the options that they have pursued over time. And it's the choices they have made, whether they've made those explicitly or implicitly, perhaps by not making a positive choice, and then how, importantly, not only the choices they've made, but also how they've executed them, whether consciously or again unconsciously. So in essence, firms have performed differently over this time because of the way that the options they have chosen. And if we look at those and think about what are the strategic options that firms actually have, there actually aren't that many. Everything else that we talk about is really built off these fundamental choices that firms have to make. And the first one, perhaps the most important one, is deciding what clients and markets to serve. And by inference, and this is really important, it's what clients and markets will we not serve. And that's sometimes quite difficult for professionals to get their heads around, that they don't need to chase after everything. And fast on the heels of that question, another choice, another option, is deciding what services to offer. And that is obviously linked to the clients you've decided to serve and the markets you've decided to serve, and also understanding, why those clients, those marketplaces would be interested in those services that you have to offer. And then it's a question about, and this is where we get into the people aspects, another strategic choice is deciding on who is actually going to deliver the service and indeed sell the service. As we know, in most professional services firms, the main people who are selling the business, selling the work, are the people who actually deliver it as well. But thereafter, there's other choices that firms have to make, some other options that they have to make. And these are all being driven off by really the previous choices that are made. Deciding on where those services will be delivered from, deciding upon how those services are going to be delivered. And there's lots of choices now with outsourcing, with nearshoring, onshoring, with use of technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So there's lots of questions there in terms of the options that firms need to decide upon. And then also when sort of the services will be delivered. And again, this may have been in the past a non-question, but with the ability to put things online for people to draw on demand, and also different services having different timeframes on them, it is a question that perhaps it hasn't been considered before, but may need to be considered in the future. And collectively, those choices, those options that firms decide upon, really they result in the potential, I should say, profit that a firm can earn. And if we look at the top 100 firms, the top 200 firms over those past 20 years, we can identify firms which have made different choices, and we can also see how those choices are often aligned, successful ones, and that's where they've performed differently. Now, to maximize your use from those choices, those options, I think you've got to think about, are they aligned? So in other words, is there an internal consistency? Is there an internal logic? So it's all very good to make some bold choices to decide on certain options. But if they don't fit, or if they fight against each other, you're on a hiding to nothing. You could even be in a worse place position. But having made those choices, or rather as part of that choice decision, you've also got to think about the resources and capabilities that the firm has. Do you have those to deliver on those choices? It's all very well having a bold choice, a bold decision to move into another marketplace, but if you have no expertise, if you have no skill sets in that area, perhaps that's a bad choice for you, even though on theory it might be. But if you haven't got the capabilities or resources, perhaps you shouldn't be doing that. So thinking about that, it's all very well to make a choice, but if it's only a wish statement, a wish list, that's not going to be no good. And then critically, I think you need to ensure that with all of these strategic options, that you can get your partners aligned and bought into the strategy. It's all very well having a fantastic strategy, making some of these choices. But if you end up that the partners still go off and do what they've always done before, they run off in different directions, or they stay within their comfort zone, again, the options you've decided upon, even though you may have the resources, don't come to fruition because you haven't brought the partners in and taken them along with you. If you're in a existing business, if you're looking at these options now in the current stage, you may be looking at where are our core competencies and building out from those. If you're starting from scratch, I would suggest that the first two questions about what clients and markets do we want to serve, and what services should we be providing that that the clients want would be the things to look at. I'm conscious of time. The first one or two choices you make, set the scene, everything flows from that, although there may be different sort of routes to take, and taking those routes you have to take into account the resources that you've got, your capabilities to build those, and importantly taking your partners along from that, and from there flows the profit. So you need to start by exploring the who in terms of clients and markets, the what and the why of the services that you're providing, the who in terms of who's going to sell and deliver it, the where in terms of location, the how in terms of process and technology, and the when in terms of urgency and demand. If you have the resources, you can get the right result. But importantly, you need to get your partners on side to deliver on those choices, to actually execute on those options. I'll hand over to Richard again now.
Oh, thanks very much. That's great. And as I said, I like the idea of bringing in the when. When is it delivered? Is it people working at midnight? Because that wasn't a question we possibly asked before. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Bernard Savage again, who, as I mentioned, is the Director of Size 10.5 Boots. And he's talking us today about how you might go about winning new work. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Derek. I want to present a bit of a warning to people, really. There's three things I want to flag today. The first thing is, we've had lots of discussion about change. We'll have much more discussion about change, and in that discussion, technology will certainly come up. And what concerns me is I think we're losing sight of something, that despite all the change, despite all the technological advances, one thing hasn't changed at all. It's a constant, and that's relationships. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that. And we see, the use of video conferencing. We see the online opportunities to provide pragmatic solutions, or to supplement what we should be doing where we can, which is the in-person contact. And COVID, regrettably, I don't think has gone away. But we do have to return to some sort of normality. And I've certainly noticed a significant difference where I've embarked on a relationship online, and then the circumstances have changed, things have opened up and relaxed, I've been able to meet people in person, and it's been like a suddenly switch in the relationship. So I really want to make the case that relationships are still as important as ever, and let's not lose sight of that. The second thing I want to flag is, for decades now, and Richard will be able to, I'm sure, expand upon this, there's been a debate about what is marketing, what is BD, and often the terms are used interchangeably without a lot of consideration of the detail, what it really means. And again, what concerns me is that I think sometimes marketing has been given a priority. People are focusing on marketing initiatives and again losing sight of the fact that people buy people, and what that means practically is that fee earners have to be visible, visible in person if that is possible, and where it isn't, using channels like this today. But I do think that again, that hasn't changed. People don't buy the sign above the door, they buy individuals, which I think also presents challenges when it comes to the idea of outsourcing business development or outsourcing, getting people to generate leads for you. People want to know the person that's delivering the work. So again, it's a reminder, a polite reminder that people buy people. The third point is something that's very current for me, because it is a result of a lot of self-reflection in recent months, and it's this. One of the things that's apparent is in a training context, in a coaching context, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and it's been troubling me for some time that what's getting in the way of people taking on board good counsel and actually implementing change. And it strikes me the big thing here is habits, and for me BD success is about good habits, and I want to share with you three aspects of that I think require more focus and attention. First one, if I had to pick one good habit, it's follow up. I hear from professionals day in, day out that they're very busy. Then I see them, going back to your talk, Derek, I see them making bad choices a lot of the time by going to the same old events, and then they're not following up. And in my mind, if you're having conversations with people, if you're having contacts with people, if you're going to events and you're not following up, you're wasting your time. I think that's habitual, and it can be addressed to some degree at least by just better diary management and actually using your diary to put the follow-up tasks in there. And at the moment we're in perhaps coming towards the end of conference season. There's a lot of big international events where people are out of the business for 2, 3, 4 days or even a week, and I'm not convinced that they're doing the necessary follow-up afterwards because they are too busy. The second aspect of habits is, for me, it's about consistency of contact. And I really don't see the value in one-off interventions, one-off events. For me, this is about things that are habitual. You operate on, it's in the subconscious. You're operating on autopilot, and I think there's a real need within the marketing BD community to really highlight the importance of consistency. Which brings me to the third point, which is about putting in systems in place that's going to make that practically easier to execute. And again, an observation, when I'm out and about, I get paid to be nosy, so I spend a lot of time in other people's organizations. One of the things that strikes me, that people that are successful, whether those are individuals, whether those are departments, practices, firms, one of the features is they have good systems. And for me, systems is not necessarily about fancy IT and technology. It's really fairly straightforward stuff like keeping track of conversations you're having with people and having that transparency. And one of the systems, and Richard, you've heard me talk about this, I'm sure, some years ago, is the coffee plan system. And the idea of the coffee plan is a really very straightforward system whereby each individual fee earner identifies his or her key contacts. Those may be clients, there may be referrers, there could be other professional contacts. These are people that you like, people you get on with, and people that you're going to make a commitment to get closer to over the next 12 months. I don't mean a one-off contact, a one-off telephone conversation. I mean a real commitment that you're going to focus in on. And this is about having conversations, developing relationships outside of open client files, open cases, open client matters. And for me, those three elements of habits can help both protect and grow a business: the follow-up, the consistency, and the systems. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Bernard. That was interesting. I think, yeah, we all forget about habits, and habits are quite hard to break as well. I mean, we always think, oh, well, we all start January 1, we're going to go to the gym, and by the end of January, whoops, oh, well, never mind. So now I'm very delighted to shift the agenda possibly away, a little bit away from marketing and selling and BD, and let's not go into what the distinction is, as you correctly say. But now what I'd like to do is to introduce Andrew Mayo, who is the director of Mayo Learning International. He's also a professor at business school, and his area of focus is human capital management, which is a huge, broad topic. So he and I've agreed that I'm going to let him talk about something that he thinks is interesting, and there we go from there. So over to you, and we will catch up with your thoughts shortly. Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yes, it is a very big subject, isn't it? I'm prompted a little bit by the poll that you shared at the beginning here. About performance, particularly of leaders and directors. Business schools, you know, and consultancies, they love to study regularly the challenges for leadership ahead in the coming years or whatever. And I think those challenges fall into two different categories. One category is, how do I lead my business in the environment I foresee for the future, which is not, to be honest, at the moment, full of optimism, is it? But secondly, quite a different thing, how do I lead my people to respond accordingly? Two different really areas of leadership. And the business environment does change. It changes all the time, mostly incrementally, and mostly because of technology, but sometimes disruptively. Today, we also have lots of firms that have to adapt for what we might call planet protection. But the challenges of leading people do not really change radically over many years. And I think they change very little. Whatever the environment, the challenges of leading people are the same, because people are people. The landscape's changed a little on that, particularly of the concept of being in the office, which was a tradition that's now been disrupted, and does create additional challenges. But what doesn't change very much at all, challenges may change, but what doesn't change very much at all, I think, are the competencies that are needed in what we might call human capital management. Competencies to deal with whatever managers, leaders have to deal with. And I'm using the term competencies to mean knowledge and skills, particularly people skills, of course. But most of our senior people also have to be leaders and managers. So I'm using that term as well, leader managers. One of my soapboxes, indeed I talked about this a bit last time I was on this, is the demise of management skills at the expense of a cult of leadership. You know, leadership is everything, the HR people will tell you. And actually, we, I think, operate in a country with increasing reputation for managerial incompetence. So the two have really got together, and those sets of competencies are pretty timeless, I think. We can tinker with the wording and the relative importance from time to time, but basically they really don't change that much. We know what they are. I've lived through a number of the alphabetical generations, you know, X and Y and Z, and I don't know where we go from here. And that's why I think that those competencies are the same, but also everyone says we don't have the level of them that we would like to have. And I'm reminded by his character Malvolio with his famous quote in Twelfth Night, "Some are born great," he said, etc., etc. Let me adapt it and say some are born as leaders, some achieve leadership through determined effort and ambition, but some have leadership thrust upon them. And the first category, the born leaders, is unfortunately very small and not nearly enough for the amount of leadership that we need. And the second category, ambition, people who strive to achieve it, yes, we certainly have those. Generally not, though, because of their great desire to lead people, but generally for more other reasons. But the reality is, I think, we have an awful lot of people on whom leadership has been thrust. In academia, where I work, I think it's an extreme case where most of the leadership seems to be in the third category. And I've never really experienced such a deficit of the needed competencies as I experienced there. But I think that deficit is not unknown in professional firms either. Leader managers are not usually first promoted because of their people skills, and that's a big problem. HR tries to fight against that But they're never really going to win that, because people who win business are the people who are the ones we want to promote. That's very understandable. Now, we have many offerings for leadership development, less so in management development, that provide the knowledge and skills needed. But to be honest, I have come to the conclusion there are limits on what you can do. It is a struggle to get someone to be visionary, somebody to see the big picture, somebody to be skilled at internal politics, somebody to think strategically or have difficult conversations with staff if they don't actually have any innate ability or indeed motivation to do that. And that's a challenge, isn't it? What a firm needs, though, is that people are led effectively. And I think that is not the same thing as every leader is a great people leader in themselves. So the challenge to lead our people well, it seems to me, is a collective effort. But this tells me how important people management support processes are. I compliment Richard on his mentoring scheme, for example, but it is things like mentoring, things like multi-input feedback. Look at the poll we've just looked at, that help people develop not just vertical feedback, but multiple input feedback, counseling, partnership with HR or people that are experts, other great people managers in the line. Not so much coaching, unless we are confident that that coaching is going to cause change. And also, it is building a culture where seeking support is a positive thing. It's absolutely okay. It is not a mark of I'm not good enough, because leadership in a firm, I believe, should be a collective effort.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I think that's it's fascinating. I like the idea of management, possibly management skills, competencies not being given sufficient attention, because actually you probably need a large number of competent managers for most businesses to be able to implement the strategy that the leader has devised. So great thought there. So we now draw to our fourth and panelist, and it's Kim Tasso. And Kim is let's bring her in. Here's Kim, founder and principal consultant of RedStarKim. And she's talking to us a bit about psychology and how that might work in the world of selling. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning. I'd like to build on some of the ideas from both Bernard and Andrew, actually. The intersection between business development and psychology is one that's very important to me, and the subject of one of the books I wrote in 2019. But today, I thought I'd share my knowledge and thoughts from my work as a counsellor and a therapist. One of the therapeutic models that's very popular was devised by Carl Rogers, an American psychologist, and you may have heard of the humanistic approach to psychotherapy, and it's actually also called client-centric. Its approach to counselling, where rapidly establishing trust and a strong relationship is critical. So it stands to reason that the principles would be important for us when we work with business relationships. It's based on three core and on the surface relatively simple concepts of empathy and congruence and universal positive regard. Let me explain a bit. So empathy is one of the core components of emotional intelligence, which most people are familiar with, and my research into law firms in particular said they all recognized it's important, although not many of them screened for it or helped with training and development in that area. But it's the ability to step into the shoes of another person and see the world through their eyes. And it sounds easy enough, but then we know that each person has a completely unique view of the world based on a whole range of things like their culture, their generation, their gender, and a lifetime of their experiences. So we have to put our own experiences and views aside, and we have to become really self-aware about that and become genuinely curious. And we have to learn to ask questions even when we have no idea what the answer is going to be, and to listen and really hear and understand rather than think about our response. And it means we have to force our brains to behave somewhat differently. We have to challenge our own biases and assumptions, which are deeply ingrained and there to make us more efficient. 180 different cognitive biases, we're going to be susceptible to some of them. So the second area is around congruence. And this is about aligning what we say with how we say it. And authenticity is how it's described in modern business thinking. And it's also one of the 10 attributes of the trusted business advisor. Exploring that a little bit, it's kind of think about one of those little social rituals we all go through where people say to you lots of times each day, how are you? And without missing a beat, you simply say, I'm fine, thanks. Even when you're not fine. That's incongruent. There's many reasons why we might not be congruent. We might not be, might be frightened of what response we got, or we might not think the relationship is strong enough, or it's one of the masks we wear. But in terms of, we might not care enough about the relationship to probe between a difference we see between what people say and how they say it. And being authentic means we have to be brave. And psychologist Brené Brown talked about the need to be a little bit vulnerable as well, not just showing our strengths. So the third area was around universal positive regard. And this is about accepting people unconditionally, to some extent about seeing the good in people and the positive in them, regardless of how different or even unpalatable their views or behavior might be. And again, we're wired to make judgments. They keep us safe. Natural that we will go through thinking about, the people we meet and work with all the time. And we have to fight against the myriad of tiny judgments that we're making. In therapy, it's only when those three conditions are met that the relationship works. There's a similar concept in human resources, and we call that psychological safety, where employees are their happiest and most productive, where they feel they're truly heard and I feel safe saying things. So it can take years to unlearn the way we've been brought up and everything in order the way we feel and think and behave. And it also takes years as therapists to put these simple principles into practice. But developing them makes us mature, non-defensive and understanding people. So it's no wonder towards the end of his possible most famous book, Carl Rogers, on becoming a person, he saw those three principles as being the possible foundation for all interpersonal relationships. And he also saw it as a key way to grow creativity. And when you look at most sales models, you will certainly see those core principles, particularly the need for empathy and listening. You will also see them in negotiation models, even in the FBI's hostage negotiation model, the behavioral change stairway, you will see certainly empathy and listening. And even in Never Split the Difference, the great book on negotiation, Chris Voss talks about the need to have universal positive regard. So empathy, congruence, universal positive regards, simple concepts that can take a lifetime to master, but which have the potential to thoroughly transform our business relationships, both within our firms and with our clients. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. That was whistle-stop tour through the world of therapy and years of knowledge, I think, crammed into those short minutes. So thank you so much for that. We've got about 10 minutes left now, so I'm just going to go through asking the panel a few questions. And if I may start off with Derek, give him a little bit of notice. And Derek, I kind of writing them down, which, who, where, how, when, etc. Where do you start? Because we don't live in a green field.
Yes, well, I think you start with those first two questions about what clients do you want to, or who do you want to have as clients and which markets to go for, and then also the services that you have, because really everything flows from that. If you look at the analysis of the firms, you look at how different firms have performed, you can see that the way that they've structured themselves, the locations they've set up, those are all decisions they have made, and it really has been driven by those decisions about the clients that you're going to serve and the services that you're going to deliver. I would say that you don't then make those in isolation. There is a certain logic that having made those decisions, the type of people you're going to have, the type of pricing you're going to have, the marketing strategy and everything else will flow from that. But you do need to flow all that through to make sure that it actually does make economic sense for you and meet any other objectives that you may have. And so that's why I said there were a number of different paths you could potentially go down. And then you may want to assess those and decide which is the most appropriate one for your business. But I think it does start off by, who are your clients, where do you want to market? And currently, whilst we are still in a hot market, but we have the recession or downturn sort of on our horizon. The current time is when you are busy. Now's the time to refocus on your clients and decide who are the real clients that you really want. That you want to nurture and go for, because it's really difficult to do that once you're in a downturn. Do it when you're in a good position to have that portfolio review.
Thanks very much. And I suppose in a way, there's always the challenge between what's done at a sort of macro level for the firm as a whole, and then it comes down to the individual partner. Because one of the things that Bernard was saying, I'll bring you in now if I may, was this piece around the importance of visibility and the extent to which, if I read my notes, the people who actually deliver are the ones who are visible to the clients. Now, how have you found that sort of working when a firm that's very top down strategically, we're going to go here, here and here, but then possibly the individual partners don't always get it or don't recognize the importance of their feedback and their visibility to make the process happen?
Well, regrettably, Richard, I don't think it is happening as well as it should. I want to really go back to what Kim was talking about and client empathy. And I think there's a lot to be learned from other sectors outside professional services. So if you take as a, for instance, the retail sector or fast moving consumer goods or hospitality sector, one of the things that's very apparent in those sectors is that at a very senior level, at board level, people make the time to go into stores, they do store checks, they do field work. And, in my mind, there's a real opportunity here for professionals for fee earners in law firms, accounting firms, property practices to achieve a number of things in one hit. So you can improve client empathy, you can actually sell more effectively, and you can learn more by simply ring fencing time to go and see people. It's very simple. So if you've got a client that's a manufacturing business, go and have a walk around the plant. No owner or no senior manager, a leader of a manufacturing business is going to say no. People love talking about what they're doing and showing you around. If you've got a client that's a retailer, it's anyone with any sort of physical space, property, is going to welcome the opportunity to show you around. And in so doing, I call it you engineer serendipity. Spend time with people, you have conversations, you make connections, one thing leads to another, and in so doing, you will do, at least go some of the way towards addressing some of the points that Kim made with regards to getting a better understanding, seeing things from the perspective of the client or your contact. So, in summary, Richard, I think it's people need to get out more in a safe way, obviously. And one of the positives I think we've seen in more recent years, which actually started before the pandemic, but the pandemic has accelerated it, is the idea of, some people call networking or meeting outdoors. I think that's a really positive thing. And I think, it both strengthens relationships and enables you to improve empathy and get some insight, which you can take back to the business. And going back to Derek's point, it then helps you make better choices because you've got a better understanding of the business.
Yeah, thanks very much. That, as always, very insightful. I think we all are aware of the need to get out and about, and maybe not on the golf course, but at least sensible, informed conversations with clients and the leadership of clients. And I'm kind of reflected on a very simple story some years ago where a big law firm, and they actually had a client, and the general counsel was very close at the client to the key partner, and really sort of godparents and kids and all that sort of stuff. And then it came to the renewal, and they weren't even invited to pitch. And after they took the guy off the rack, they kind of said, well, what happened? And they said it was very simple. Management changed at the client, and they were expecting their key supplier management to come and talk to them. It never happened. So the fact that you guys were buddies was irrelevant. It's an extreme case, but it was their largest client, so it had quite an impact. So I'll leave that thought with you about the role of management engaging, maybe not with the client directly, but with the management of the client and the leaders of that client. Perhaps I can turn back now to Andrew. And Andrew, I was really interested in your comment around the lack of management skills and the fact that the UK is seen in many ways as being deficient in that arena. I mean, what does good look like in the management skills area, in your view?
Well, I think, Richard, it's very basic stuff. It's. I mean, I once went when I was very young on a course of 8. It was an American course, but it was excellently put together. 8 key skills that managers need. So we're talking about planning, organizing, reviewing, controlling, appraising, all those kind of things. Not just people skills, but logistics skills, if you like. Organizing skills. Now, we kind of take these for granted, but we all know people, don't we, who are actually not very good at a lot of these things. And what we want to focus on these days, it seems to me, when it comes to developing them, is we want you to be leaders. We want to tell you about being a visionary. We want to tell you about motivating your people and so on. All good stuff. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's not much use if I can't actually make anything happen. And you know, everywhere around us, unfortunately, in this country, we see, you know, if you've been through an airport recently, it's a very good example. Somebody somewhere just isn't managing stuff. And the interesting thing about Johnson's great sort of hero is the vaccination program. Okay, fair enough. What happened there? He appointed a great manager and said, the civil service will not get in your way. Just manage this. And she did brilliantly, didn't she, Kate Bingham? What a great example that was. And her management capabilities just not celebrated enough, right? Because the politicians take all the glory. But if only we had more like her running our public services. You know.
We'll let you off your soapbox, I think, there, Andrew. But thank you for that. Kim, really interested, and just staying with the idea you were floating towards the end of psychological safety for your people. And if you are in a leadership role, what does that look like, and how can you as a leader actually influence that, do you think?
For me, psychological safety is about people feeling comfortable about putting their hands up or saying what they really think is happening, or admitting if there's a mistake. It means that there isn't a blame culture. So you need, in that environment of psychological safety, for people to welcome, you know, critical feedback or identification of problems as a good thing, as a learning environment, rather than as something to, you know, label with people with and beat them up. So people have got to feel comfortable about being open. So a leader who encourages that feedback and that openness and actually demonstrates it themselves by admitting that perhaps there are things that they've not done to the best of their ability. My point about vulnerability, I think, you know, people do what they see their leaders do. So if leaders will own up to things not working right or being mistakes, other people will feel comfortable doing the same. I'm conscious of time, so I'll shut up there.
Well, no, it's sadly it is that time, and so I'll just shift to the gallery view, if I may. So in the last minute, what's always quite nice is to ask each of you just to give me one thing that you've taken away from today. We'll start off with Bernard, put you on the spot. What's the one thing you've learned from being on the panel today?
I think I'm going to go to Andrew, actually, and it's a nice reminder. To me, it reminds me of going the, as I say, Waterstones. Other bookshops are available, looking through the business section, seeing rows and rows and rows of books on strategy and leadership, and absolutely nothing or barely anything on execution and management. So to me, it's a nice reminder to perhaps raise the ante on management and execution, and less so on strategy, which is no disrespect to Derek.
Andrew, what's your one takeaway from today?
Well, I think two things I found very supportive to what I was saying. Firstly, Bernard's emphasis on, you know, we need to go out there and talk to people, all kinds of people, to learn what's really happening, which relates to what Kim was talking about in openness. And it's that openness of culture that I think makes all the difference in being able to manage performance, because people feel free to talk about things and to get help. And that's just critical.
Derek, what's your takeaway? You're mute.
I really enjoy what Bernard and Kim mentioned about, you know, relationships and empathy and everything, because I think those are the foundations of good business development in the professions. But I'll also echo what Andrew was saying about leaders and managers. And I think the particular challenges in professional services firms is that you have partners and they are not only managers and leaders, but they're also producers. And it's juggling those three aspects, which is often quite challenging, and one area which partners often not given enough development and opportunities to develop.
And the final word for Kim?
I think my first choice would be going to what Derek said about, you know, strategy, which is ultimately about choice, choosing markets, choosing clients, choosing what, choosing how, because, you know, that in essence for me is the key thing around strategy. So I think that will be key. And also the point about sort of that Andrew was talking about leadership skills, about, you know, the range of qualities you need to be a great leader and a great manager are really important.
Right. Well, what more can I say other than we're a little over time? So thank you for that. But thank you all for staying with us. A great audience. I don't think we've lost anybody all day, actually, which is awesome. We're back on the 1st of July. But before that, I would like to thank Bernard for his great thoughts on winning and getting out there and talking to people. I'd like to thank Andrew, reminding us that it's all very well having a strategy, but if you don't implement it through effective management, you might as well not bother. I'd like Derek to thank us for reminding us that partners have to juggle 3 hats: the thinker, the salesperson, and also the deliverer. And I'd like to thank Kim for taking us back to some fairly basic human behavior, and how many of us honestly can sit down and say that we are empathetic, that we are authentic, and that we are open to new people and new ideas. I'm not sure, but it's obviously a great place to aspire to. So thank you, Kim, and thank you for helping us through that. So on the 1st of July, going back to that for a second, I've got Rachel Holmes from the Matrix Chambers, Andrew Manning, who's Bevan Ashford's former CEO, Francesca, I mentioned before, and then Fiona Haythorne, who runs Women on Board. So we got a really interesting panel for you then on the 1st of July, 2 weeks from now. I shall be having my birthday party on the 30th of June in London on the night before. So if I'm a little bit over, had a few too many drinks on the 1st, the show might go even better than today, but I don't think that would be possible. So I really enjoyed it. So thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing the audience in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.